On this episode of the Easy Prey podcast, I talk with Steve Weisman about BEC scams. In addition to being a lawyer, Steve teaches about white-collar crime at Bentley University and is one of the country's leading experts in scams and identity theft. Steve is also the man behind Scamicide.com, where he tells you things aren't as bad as you think, they're far worse. I'm your host, Chris Parker, and this is the Easy Prey podcast. Thank you for joining us, Steve. I'm really excited to have you on the podcast as we get to talk about BEC scams and more. But first and foremost, today is March 3rd when we're recording this, and that is the 138th anniversary of Charles Ponzi, known for the Ponzi scheme. And you have a story you want to tell us about that.
Well, what's kind of interesting is Ponzi, the name has just become so identified with the scam that he gave his name to. And in the essence of it still works today. And Bernie Madoff has used it. Many others have used it. And the thing is, it's marvelous in its simplicity because it starts out with early investors get paid, and they get paid really, really well. Ponzi was paying his victims 50% profits in a month.
Oh my goodness.
And it worked. And so what happens is his was leveraging the differences in money values and money fluctuations between the United States and Britain, having to do with a certain type of stamp that was used in international business transactions. It's enough, though, that sounds legit, but no one really knows what's going on. So it works with paying off the early investors with money from the later investors. Eventually, it collapses. In Ponzi's case, what brought him down was a newspaper investigation in which they calculated out, they had an idea of how many customers he had. And in order to have that many customers, he had to have more stamps than existed in the world. Okay. So it's always the same thing. I always marvel when I hear when Ponzi was arrested, the wonderful arrogance of some of these criminals. I am innocent and I can't wait for my day in court. Yeah, well, it didn't work out so well. But Ponzi, of course, didn't originate this scheme. The scheme actually goes back to about 1870. Again, Ponzi was out of Boston, and also out of Boston was a woman. Women don't get credit for what they do. And in this case, a woman named Sarah Howe. And Sarah Howe formed the Women's Only Bank. And it was very interesting and a good example of not just what should have been called a Howe fraud, but affinity fraud. Women trusted her because she was a woman. She would not take advantage of us. And that was what she said. Men will take advantage of you. Men will not do right by you. I will. So you give your money to me, you put it in my bank, you get a tremendous return, and I'll help manage it for you. She'd even limit what they could take out. Well, it was, of course, a total Ponzi scheme. There was no bank. She was just taking the money and paying off early investors with the money from later investors. She got caught. She went to prison, came out, did the same thing again, went back to prison. But this kind of scam, it definitely has proven to be effective over the years. And here again, with Bernie Madoff, he also coupled to a great extent his with affinity fraud. Madoff is Jewish. He preyed upon a lot of Jewish charities and Jewish individuals. You can find it of any religious group. There are Ponzi schemes with Marines, military. I knew a Ponzi scammer in Boston, a guy named Brad Blight, and he was a Mason, and he represented a lot of Masons chapters. And talking with some of his victims, the biggest thing was, how could a fellow Mason do that to me? But it comes down to my motto. My motto is, trust me. You can't trust anyone.
That's a really good motto to have. Thank you for sharing that story. So also kind of in the news recently is Barbara Corcoran from Shark Tank fell victim, or her organization fell victim to what is referred to as a BEC scam, lost approximately $400,000. Can you talk to us a little about what a BEC scam is?
Yeah, fascinating one. And this is something that the FBI and law enforcement have really been putting an emphasis on. Probably companies worldwide have lost multi-billion dollars to this scam in just the last year, and it keeps going. It went up. The losses went up by about 500 million last year. It's incredible how it starts, like many scams, the business email compromise, with someone hacks into a particular company. And generally, this is done. So many scams like this, cyber scams, start with a phishing or a more specifically tailored spear phishing email. It's an email that lures you to click on a link and download malware. Now, no matter how good your security software is, it's never going to be as good as the latest, what we call zero-day defects, vulnerabilities for which there aren't any known defenses. So they get into your company, they get into your computers, and they watch. They see who the people are, how they write, what their addresses are, who your customers are. And then what they will generally do with this is they will wait, often when the CEO or someone in charge is out of the country, and an email will come from them. I need you to wire, it's always wiring money, wire money to this company with which we do business, or this company just changed their bank account. And the money is generally wired. The money is generally lost. In a new variation of this, and this was really incredible, a German company lost money with a phone scam. And this was one of the CEO supposedly called and instructed the money to be sent, but using all kinds of cloning software, it sounded like the voice of the CEO.
Oh, that's scary.
And you can do that these days. So the solution for companies is you've got to have some kind of dual factor authentication to be able to. First of all, you want to protect. Again, alert your employees not to click on links or download attachments unless they're absolutely sure and confirmed. But when you get any kind of wiring, you've got to have more than one person on there to confirm, particularly if it is going to a new and a different address. But it's falling through the cracks. Companies, with Barbara Corcoran's, one of her things she was saying was this was not something unusual, and the type of company that it was supposedly being sent to seemed like one of the companies we would work with. So you've got to be skeptical.
And so in her case, there wasn't actually a compromise of their email platform, though, was there?
No, that was kind of interesting. This one, they're all sophisticated at that level, but this one was just a tad less. And it's one that gets biased. The email that came in looked like the email address of one of her employees, but it had a letter off. And this is sometimes we'll get these spear phishing emails and they'll look really good. Maybe it appears to come from a company with which we do business. Maybe it's Netflix, maybe it's a bank. And it's real easy to counterfeit those. I teach at Bentley University. I teach white-collar crime. And before I taught at Bentley, I taught in the state prison system in Massachusetts. And some of the older con men used to decry the fact that back when they were counterfeiting, it took skill. Now a 14-year-old kid can do anything on his computer. So they send you that email, and they convince you to do whatever. But if you look at the address from which it's sent, many times it's an address that has absolutely nothing to do with the particular company. Sometimes it's because the bad guys are routing these scam emails through what they call botnets. There's a network of zombie computers that have been hacked into. But other times they will phony up an address that will look legitimate. It may look like Netflix.com, but it may have an extra L in there. And if you're looking quickly at it, you're not really going to notice. Yeah. And that is what had happened with Barbara Corcoran.
Yeah, there was a situation that I'm personally aware of where the accountant got an email that looked like it came from the CEO of the company. It was his name. It had his regular internal signature line on it with the name, address, phone number, all the nice font styling and all of that stuff. And it was the whole very similar story. Hey, I'm on a phone with a new vendor. I'm going to be stuck on this conference call for a couple of hours, but I need you to wire money to them right now. And so they put in that urgency. They put in the emotion. They kind of quell some of the normal fears. And, the accountant started to process it. And the thing that saved is that he actually came out of his office and was going to the bathroom or something like that. And she said, "Oh, hey, do you want to send it from this account or that account? You didn't tell me which account you wanted me to send the money from." And he's like, "I didn't tell you to send any money." So I rush into her office and look at it. And, she was in the accounting software on the bank's website. And the gist was like, "Oh, well, actually, I don't know which account to send it from." And that was what saved him. It wasn't a best practice. It wasn't, a second factor authentication. It was just a happenstance that she saw him out of the corner of the eye and was very, very lucky to not have that happen.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. Sometimes with many of these kinds of business email compromises, you'll find them coming from other countries where perhaps English is not a primary language. So, occasionally you'll see the less sophisticated criminal and there'll be grammatical errors. But the ones that I've seen, like you just described, they are so adept. I mean, some of these, let's look at it. Scam artists are the only criminals we call artists, and they really are artists, and they have a knowledge of psychology that Freud would have envied. I mean, they're really good at knowing what to appeal to get to in us to get us to do what they want.
So what are some of the things that they appeal to get what they want from us?
Well, in the case, you're talking about the business email compromise or in scams in general?
Let's just talk to scams in general, and then we can drill down to business email compromises.
Well, it's interesting because they say the same things that move the market: fear and greed. So very often it is a matter of greed and investments. No one should ever invest in anything that they don't truly understand. It was a bit of chutzpah, gall. But Bernie Madoff, in an interview, actually blamed his victims at one point. He said,
"Wow.
They should have known better. Any intelligent person who looked into what I said I did and how I said I did it would know that it didn't work and it was impossible." And that's the thing. People, we get lazy. And we want this quick, easy investment, maybe something that's right now. There are a lot of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency scams where people invest because they think it is the hot thing. I'll tell you, talking about how greed comes in, one of the most wonderfully sophisticated scams, and who said the East and West can't work together? This was Ukrainian hackers working with American stockbrokers. And what happened was the Ukrainian hackers hacked into JP Morgan. And I remember when this happened, I was being interviewed and I really didn't know what was going on. They got millions of email addresses and names of really well-heeled customers, but that was it. No other personal information. And I'm thinking, what do they want with that? What they wanted was people that probably would be prey to investments. Mm-hmm. And what they did was, it was a new version of what's called pump and dump. Pump and dump is when the victim is lured into buying the stock of a legitimate company, a penny stock, a low cap stock. The bad guys have bought it early, but they lure so many people into buying it, the price goes up, the bad guys sell out, they dump their stock. Meanwhile, when the truth comes out, the stock price drops down and the investors lose. So in this case, the names of all of those investors was given to the stockbrokers who sent out the pump letter to various people. They fell for it, and they were victimized. They were caught. And during the trial in Manhattan, there was some evidence which was fascinating, with one of the Ukrainian hackers asking another, why would an American buy a stock merely because of an email from a stranger? And, which is a great question. And the other hacker said, what was it? Americans buy stock like we drink vodka. So apparently we're not as careful as we should be when it comes to our investments. But we also scare people. And it's a matter of, you have to act at this point, or there's been a problem with your account. You need to provide information. So they'll appeal to whatever works.
Yeah. So when it comes to BEC scams and these trying to get you people to wire money, what are some of the tactics that they're using to make it look real and legitimate, aside from a good email address?
Yeah, they will. Well, first of all, they do their research, and that's where you always, got to have a begrudging admiring of these people. So they will see what companies the company that they're attacking does business with, and so they'll send a letter, an email that's saying we are changing their invoice, and they're changing the bank to which they want things deposited, or they will find other kinds of connections and things that are totally within the mode of business and business plan of the particular company. So there's no reason for them to be suspicious.
Yeah. And as far as like things that companies can do to prevent these scams from being effective, what could companies do?
The biggest thing is to have, I think, multiple eyes on there. First of all, is you don't jump. There's no emergency to wire money. And that's another thing. They always want you to act. Scammers always want you to act quickly. And so there'll be all kinds of reasons for doing so. There really aren't those kinds of reasons necessarily in the real world. You always got to be particularly skeptical, because this is done a lot, when the CEO or the CFO who is requesting this is doing this from outside the country or not there where you can check back with them. Mm-hmm. So if a company finds the order is coming from someone who is outside of the country, you're always wary. You also want to check back. There should be some form of confirmation to make sure it is the correct person that is making the order and where they're sending it. So you double check everything if it isn't exactly the same as what you've always done.
Gotcha. Do you also recommend kind of the frontline staff, the operators, not disclosing information about, who's the head accountant? I need to get a hold of them, or not even worth trying to do?
I think it really is. And what some scammers will do is they go on LinkedIn and they'll be looking for people who may be working at targeted companies. And for that reason, some companies, even paranoids have enemies, and some companies will limit the social media exposure and information that their employees can give out. You don't want to make things easier for the scammers, but you're right on that.
So it's really a lot about just awareness and having some good practices being in place. And if something sounds urgent, take a breath.
Yeah.
Is it really that urgent? The more urgency there is, the more kind of effort there needs to be in thinking, okay, is this really urgent, but are they trying to overwhelm my sense of practice with the urgency?
Yeah, urgency is always the thing. There was the phone is another place where a lot of scams come from. And I knew someone who worked in computer security who got a call about a problem with his credit card. Now, you can get a call, and the scammers can spoof your caller ID, so it makes it look like it may be coming from Citibank. And so I said, there's a problem. They did ask for the debit card number. Now, if it's your bank, they have your debit card number. But then what they said to the security guy is, we need to act immediately. We need to confirm your number. Here's the last 4 digits of your social security number, so we're legit. And this person, he fell for it, and particularly with the urgency, and then realized, a lot of places out there, particularly because of data breaches, have the last 4 digits. They have your full social security number. So he immediately called his bank, his bank afterward. And by that time, his bank account had already been emptied. And the lesson here is, on the phone, you never, ever know when you get a phone call, regardless of what it says on there, who is actually calling you. So you never give a credit card. You never give personal information, anything over the phone to someone you haven't called. If it sounds legit, you call back at a number that is accurate. So if it's with your credit card, flip your credit card over, get the 800 number, call that. But make sure you call it correctly, because the bad guys are sometimes so good, they will buy the number that may be a digit off, and you may end up calling the bad guys thinking you're being really good.
Yeah, and I've had that happen to me as well, not being scammed, but I got a call saying, hey, we're calling from your bank about a fraudulent transaction. And my response was, that's great. I'm going to hang up and call you back at, no, you don't need to do that. I'm like, Well, the fact that, like, I'm thinking to myself, the fact that you're arguing with me that I
Right.
don't need to do that proves that you're a scammer. And it's like,
Oh,
click.
absolutely.
And I still call the bank, say, hey, I just got a phone call claiming to be from you
Yeah.
guys with a fraudulent transaction. Was there a fraudulent transaction? Nope. Okay. Thank you. Have a nice day. And so I, try not to do that. I've gotten fake phone calls from my electric company as
Sure.
well.
Those are huge. Two of the biggest ones are from the IRS and Social Security. And here's the thing: is that it's always, how do I know it's the IRS? Well, it's really easy.
They don't call.
Exactly. They don't call you. They don't email you. They don't text you. So if it's any of those communications from the IRS or Social Security, you know it's a scam.
Yeah, that's really, really good. It's just always assume that's something's a scam.
Yeah.
So coming back to the BEC scams, what's the likelihood of actually getting your money back if you've wired it offshore?
Pretty damn low, because that's the thing with wiring. Although another thing with so many scams, we're from the IRS. You've got to pay us this money right away. Go out and get an iTunes gift card.
Yeah.
The fact that the IRS has to actually say on its website, we don't take gift cards for payments. But the big thing is wiring money is once it's wired, it's gone. About the only chance you have is that sophisticated criminals, for money laundering purposes, will bounce money from account to account to account. So if somehow acting immediately, you're able to intercept before it has gone through to another account, you've got a shot. I got to say, I'm really not aware of many, if any, that have been able to get that money back.
The great example of someone who was Barbara Corcoran, who that either she or someone on her team or her bank acted quick enough that they were actually able to get the funds frozen temporarily, or at least long enough for them to be able to prove to the bank that there was actually fraud involved.
Another interesting aspect that doesn't get talked about very much at all when we're talking about this particular, the business email compromise, which is, like I said, a multi-billion-dollar scam. The many companies will have insurance to protect them from cyber threats. This would not qualify because in many instances, well, so they stole the money from you? No, actually, I was tricked and I sent that. Well, that doesn't apply to your insurance. There are a number actually of cases going on now in the courts where people have challenged the fact that insurance companies have not covered these. But the bottom line is you very well may be totally out. So the place to find that helping hand is at the end of your own arm, and be very, very careful.
Yeah. A while back, I was sending money to a relative overseas, and the bank that I normally do business with, I don't disclose who I normally do business with,
Right.
but they don't do the type of transfer that I was trying to do. I'll leave it at that. And so I had to open up an account at another bank and move some money in there, and very quickly went online to wire the money to a relative overseas. And I don't know if it was either that day or the following morning, I got a call from the bank saying, hey, we noticed that you just opened an account and you're doing a wire transfer. Who are you sending the money to? How do you know this person? Are you sure it's really this person? Yes. How long have you known them? Are you really, really sure that you're wanting to do this? Because once you send the money, if it turns out to be fraud, you're not going to get it back. I was really impressed with the bank and the woman who was like, she asked great questions. I'm like, well, this is a bank really being proactive about fund transfers.
Yeah, something. I want to know who that bank is off there, because that is absolutely terrific, and what should be done. And it brings up a couple of things where the Federal Trade Commission has tried to get companies to do that, and you'll notice if you go to a Walmart, they may have a sign on the wall that says it, but the employees don't really ask about it. Yeah. Western Union, obviously, when you're sending money, they're
Red
one
flag.
of the biggest. And Western Union actually was punished and found responsible because they were kind of a willing participant in some of these scams, and it wasn't that they were getting any kind of kickbacks. They were getting their fees. They weren't asking. They should have been asking, and so they have changed as a result of the Federal Trade Commission's lawsuit and substantial fine. Once again, it's a wonderful settlement. So when the FTC settles civilly, and I explained this to my student, you'll see there's no admission of liability. So it's we didn't do anything wrong, and we promised never to do it again. And here's the money because we didn't do anything wrong. But yes, wiring money, banks should be better with this. This is something often we see with the elderly who are picked on for scams quite more than any other group. Although millennials are right up there, which is kind of interesting. But at their banks, not enough banks have been taking the steps, which now there's some, relatively newer laws for them to inquire, but they should be questioning this. It should be that second set of eyes on every transaction.
And I suppose with banks and talking corporate, if you're a multi-million-dollar business and you do a $10,000 wire transfer to someone you haven't done before, your bank is not even going to flinch at that if that's kind of within your normal pattern. It's once you start getting out of your normal pattern that they might
and that's
do something.
It. And and some of these scammers know to keep the money, they can make a lot of money and keep it within grounds that aren't going to be so totally alarming. Interesting thing, though, I want to mention in regard to as far as seniors and scams, and they work a lot with seniors and scams, and they're targeted with particular scams, like the Jamaican lottery scam is primarily aimed at seniors. But seniors actually have a physiological excuse. There were some studies done at the University of Iowa and Cornell that talk about a part of our brain that I can't pronounce that deals with skepticism, and it becomes less viable as we age. And so there actually is a physiological basis for that senior being more likely to be a victim, which is also one reason why we need to take care of our parents and grandparents and to make sure that they're not being taken advantage of. But that is a reason for millennials. That's a whole new thing. They're too used to everything being computerized and digitized, and they're too trusting. They do everything without taking quite enough precautions. They think they're bomb-proof, and it comes back to bite them a lot of the time.
Yep, that's all really good advice. Take care of the young ones, take care of the older ones. We have a responsibility to take care of those around us.
We're all in it together.
Well, Steve, I really appreciate you coming on today and talking about BEC scams and so many other things and the anniversary of Charles Ponzi. If people want to learn more about you and what you do, how can they get a hold of you?
Best place is to go to scamicide.com. That's SCAMICIDE.com. And there you can find, every day there is a unique scam of the day. We're always alerting people what is the latest thing to watch out for. And when I started this about 10 years ago, I wondered if I was going to have a scam of the day for every day. And so far, we've done more than 6,000, and we haven't had to repeat anything yet. So you can find information about different scams. You can find out if you've been a victim, what you can do. Actually, we also have links to the Federal Trade Commission when there are refunds in various programs. It's a good place to check out every day.
Great. That sounds like an awesome resource. Thank you so much for coming on today. I super appreciate your time.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Easy Pray podcast. If you found this episode helpful, share it with someone you know and leave a review on iTunes. Notes and a transcript of this episode with Steve Weisman can be found at easypray.com/4. Have you been a victim of a scam, and are you interested in sharing your story with the Easy Pray audience? Head over to easypray.com/mystory to learn more.